So my brothers and sisters, today we have a very good first reading. I remember a couple of years ago, a kid came up to me after Mass and, "Boy, Father, Jesus thought of everything." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, he even tells us how to treat the aliens." I'm like, it's not that kind of alien. But this first reading is quite revolutionary, because the thought of giving justice to those who are the foreigner, to the widow and the orphan, was a very strange concept in the ancient Old Testament world. Really might made right back then. And if you were powerful, it gave you rights over those who were not powerful. And if no one was going to speak up, if no one could counter you, if they couldn't fight back, then there was really nothing stopping you from doing what you wanted. But here we see in the law of Moses and his moral teaching, where he's teaching us to not just treat the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan, and the poor with justice, but even to treat them better than maybe someone who is doing well. In fact, with the poor, to not charge interest, to not extort them in any way. In fact, if you take a cloak, as a down payment, give it back at night so they have something to sleep with, so they're not out in the cold. And I think for each of us, this is still a revolutionary teaching in so many ways. But yet, in the tradition of the church, we see it coming forth. In our gospel reading, we have another revolutionary teaching, one that would have caught the leaders and the people of that time completely off guard. Something that we're very familiar with, the Golden Rule. But our culture is based on biblical truths. Theirs was not. And so the Jewish people thought that as long as they were ritually clean, as long as they were doing the things that the faith prescribed, they were good to go. They were loving God. The thought that you have to love God with your heart, your soul, and your mind is a foreign concept. As long as you look the part, you're good to go. But let's look at this a little bit more deeply. You shall love the Lord your God. Remember, the word love in the Bible is not an emotion, it's not a feeling, it's not a warm fuzzy. Love is always in action. The Greek word being used here is charity, love in action. And so here, if we truly are going to love God, we need to show it, not just think it. And then it's your God, not the God, your God. Meaning that personal relationship that we are called to have with God, that He is truly our Father. That God is not some distant power or some set of truths, but a personal God that we can truly come to know. In fact, one of the goals of catechesis is to help our kids and teens not just understand the faith, but really know who God is, to have an actual relationship with Him. It's easy to know the Ten Commandments, although ask some of the confirmation students studying for their test, might be a little harder right now. It's easy to know them, but it's a lot deeper and more important that we actually know God through them. That's not just about right and wrong, it's about the delightful way that we get to live our lives on this side of heaven with God. And then with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. So with all your heart, who we are inside that invisible part that God has created in us, our personality, our thinking, our feelings, the way we see the world, our desires, our hopes, our dreams, heart, soul, and mind, that we love Him with all that activity that we have inside. This is the greatest and the first commandment. One thing we need to be very careful about, though, is if our faith is all about following through, doing what we're supposed to do. It's all about action. And it's not about the inside. We really miss one of the most beautiful parts of the faith, which is actually living with God and knowing Him, feeling His presence among us. But we ourselves have to be living from the heart in order to do that. We can't just be living a functional life and just being numb to everything. We have to really be people who are thinking and discerning. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, here's the problem. If we don't love ourselves, can we really love our neighbor? And I think that is one of the great problems we're seeing in our culture right now, is there are a lot of people who just don't seem to like themselves a whole lot, which is what enables them to do harm and violence to others. I'm just going to treat people like I treat myself, and if I am my own worst enemy, well then, here it comes. But we need to see the dignity that God has given us. We need to treat ourselves with respect. And this starts in the way we think about ourselves, that inner dialogue that we have, which sometimes goes out loud too when we're alone. How do we talk to ourselves? How do we treat ourselves? Do we treat ourselves with respect and reverence and dignity, or do we constantly put ourselves down? Do we feel comfortable in our own skin? Are we happy with who we are and who we are becoming? Or do we just denigrate ourselves all the time? See, love of neighbor starts here. And I think sometimes we think, well, I really can't change culture. I can't change the community. I can't change what my neighbors are doing. Well, in a way that's true, but in a way it's not. Because world change, cultural change, starts right here with each one of us. Because Jesus tells us that we are called to be light to the world. We're called to be salt for the earth. We are called to melt those hearts that are hardened and frozen with hatred. And the way we do that is by modeling what life could be for them, what love really looks like, what a joyful, peaceful life can truly be. If all of us take a moment to ponder, aren't there a number of people who have really inspired us to better ways of living, to more wholesome ways of being? And I think you look at those people who really do inspire us, you can see the faith. You can see that love of God working in them. And being around them just wants, at least in my life, just makes me want to know and love God more, to know and love myself more, to know and love my neighbor more, to be more like them, to have that joy, that peace, that happiness, that fulfillment that they have. In fact, St. Paul tells us in the second reading how Macedonia and Achaia are doing such a good job living the faith that the apostles no longer need to preach in the surrounding region, because it's a testimony of those Macedonians and Achaeans who are converting the masses. It's because of their love. It's because of their joy, their peace, that everyone wants to hear about who this Jesus guy is. Everyone wants to come to church and see what the practice of faith is all about. And see, this is the opportunity that we have right now in our community. Because in one sense, we can just fold our arms and sit back and say, they're not coming to church, it's their fault. But another way is maybe they're waiting to be inspired. Maybe they're waiting to see the impact that faith truly has in our lives. And I think sometimes with a false modesty or false humility, we hold back from really shining that light, from really showing the joy and the peace of faith, the difference that faith really makes and has made in our lives. But this is what we need to be all about. Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is. And Jesus tells us that his great commandment is what all the prophets and the whole law depends on. It is the fundamental one that everything else rests upon. And I think for us, it's important that we do a back to the basics sometimes. There are so many things to worry about. There are so many good things, but what is the greatest? There are so many things that we can be about, but what is the best? And today, Jesus really answers that question for us. And this needs to be in our heads and our hearts throughout the day. Am I living by this greatest commandment? Am I living by the core? I remember when I was in seminary a few times, the professor would be teaching us for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then in one class, they'd show us the basics, the foundation of that class. Now it all makes sense. It's once you see the key of something, everything else falls into place. Here we have the key of faith, that everything falls into place with it. But we need to live by it. I was talking to the food bank this week. I think it was Friday, actually. I talked to them a couple times this week. And they're going to be running an article on our collaborative team here in the newsletter here pretty quick. We'll get copies out to you guys. And they were asking me, what is one of the most important things of what you're doing? And I said, well, one of the principles we're founded upon, and those here who work at it, you know this very well, that I have my office. And what my office is all the odd special stuff. So we get a lot of the cool little dishes from festival and fancy salads and all kinds of stuff. That all goes to my office. And what I do is as the cars come up, if I see families who look like they need a little pick-me-up, a mom who just absolutely had it with her kids, people who just seem a little bit down, that's when I go into my office and give them some of those things to help lift up their day, to put a smile on their face, to give a little bit of dignity to them in their time of need. I can't imagine what it must be like to be hungry and indeed to come to a mobile food pantry. How humbling and hopefully not with us, humiliating that must be. And that's what the office is all about. I remember a couple of weeks ago we had a box of 50 chocolate bars. I had so much fun giving those to all the moms, and they were so happy, But that's what we need to be all about, is showing that love and that joy, treating one another with the same dignity and respect that we need to be treating ourselves. And I think for us as a parish, this is what we need to be all about. In our catechism, this is what we need to be all about, is helping to inspire our youth to live lives that are not just for themselves, but are really for others, that they may truly live a good and holy and satisfying life. I think one of the worst things that can happen to us in the day is we come to go to bed at night and we just kind of realize that the day was just a blur. Didn't really have any meaning and purpose. Didn't really make a difference. I can't imagine a worse feeling than that. When I think each day can be filled with wonder and awe of God. Can we really be filled with great joy and thanksgiving, recognizing all the great things God has done in our midst? Whether it be those small little exchanges we have with people, or those little God coincidences that God orchestrates to allow us to really share our faith and to be that agent of difference for others. So let us pray that we may ground ourselves more and more on this greatest commandment, on love of God first, on love of self, so that we may love our neighbors. And that as we celebrate this Mass, let's pray that Jesus may inspire us all the more through others, that being inspired, we may live more courageously in a more meaningful and purposeful way, and truly make a difference in our world in the way that we live for Christ. God bless you.